What the fuck?
Don't touch that.
Where's the money?
Money?
In the safe, the money!
We are talking Witches of Amityville Academy, also known as Witches of Amityville, also known as Witchcraft. This one is directed by Rebecca Matthews and stars Kira Reed-Lorsch, Donna Spangler and Sarah T. Cohen. I would say the plot of this one is best described as Harry Potter meets American Story, specifically the Coven season. So what we have this this young girl played by Sarah T. Cohen called Jessica, who has got an invitation to join a somewhat prestigious academy. Mysterious because she never actually applied for this. When she goes there, she finds out it's actually an academy for witches. However, it is run by a dark witch who wants to actually sacrifice her to gain power through this kind of demonic ritual. She's actually saved by the ghostly reincarnations of the Belle Witch sisters, 3 Belle Witch sisters, who want to train her for good, and thus becomes a battle, good versus evil, evil witch versus good witch. What will happen? You have to watch the movie to find out. So, first of all, let's talk about Amityville. I have to point this out because there's so many Amityville movies that you get out here. Is this part of the official Amityville franchise, you might say? No, it isn't. Amityville is a real place in America. Therefore, it exists in the public domain. Therefore, anyone can make a movie and call it Amityville because the name isn't trademarked. So you can make an Amityville from a British production company. And, you know, some people would assume that it is part of the Amityville franchise. There's actually a good few movies that are nothing to do with the official Amityville franchise, that do brandish the name. So, with that out of the way, the movie actually has flashbacks, from centuries ago, kind of showing you the Belle Witch sisters getting kind of hung for their crimes, things like this. So, what works first of all? I've got to say, this is quite a well shot movie. Rebecca Matthews, she's done a few movies that I've actually reviewed here, and I would say on a technical standpoint, this movie is by far the most proficient. So I feel that Matthews is certainly progressing as a filmmaker in terms of things like shot composition, sequence running time, editing, things like this. I feel it's a more proficiently made movie than, say, the Pet Graveyard movie and stuff that she's made previously. So a definite progression on the kind of the technical side stuff here. I gotta say, I thought the acting wasn't too bad for this movie. I actually thought Sarah T. Cohen did a pretty good job. Again, I've seen her in kind of previous B-movie horror movies, and I think she does a pretty good job here. I actually quite enjoyed our kind of cougar-like 3 good witches. The Bell sisters, I thought they were quite kind of fun characters, and have a somewhat cute kind of valley girl, like older woman, middle-aged cougar valley girl sort of thing going on. I thought it was quite endearing. Interestingly, that this movie, the cast is nearly all female. There's a couple of very small roles for male characters, but it's nearly entirely female. So I think this will definitely would cover a film that will be appreciated by a kind of like the female horror audience. Certainly those who like things like the Vampire Diaries, that kind of crowd, things like that. And obviously the easiest comparison here is the American Story Coven and Apocalypse storylines. It's greatly similar to that, although it doesn't quite have the production value, the depth, that kind of like the A-list kind of the acting that one obviously does have. But nevertheless, I feel the comparisons certainly to that are kind of fair here. I actually quite enjoyed the characters, like I've said. I thought the actual characters, even from our kind of evil witch, they're a bit hammy, let's be honest, but nonetheless, they're kind of fun in a B-movie schlocky way. And The story in itself is relatively simple, but nonetheless quite intriguing. What doesn't work? I think the movie needs a little bit more excitement. I think one of the issues is when we have our face-offs between the good and evil sides here, you'll be reminded of one of the critiques that was formed from the latest X-Men film, the Dark Phoenix movie, where you have face-offs with people just kind of holding their arms in the air with kind of magic forces, or in their case X-Men powers, with nothing really happening. And that's the case here. So we have these back and forths, these magical contests between the good witches and the evil witches, and it's more or less people kind of standing still with their hands in the air, kind of with a concentrating face on, and we are to believe that magic is kind of like happening there. Doesn't make for particularly exciting viewing, I have to say. I think the whole thing, as I've kind of alluded to, although I kind of enjoyed it, does have this kind of little bit of a Valley Girl feel to it. Even though it's a British production company here, nonetheless, it still feels a little bit like, a little bit lowest common denominator, I would say, in certain aspects. It's not really trying to be anything too kind of cerebral here, let me just say that. Effects-wise, it really isn't anything to write home about. Again, it's a lower budget film. I appreciate they don't have the money to kind of do much in the way of effects or kind of like makeup and stuff like that. I think maybe a little bit more could have still been done to make it a little bit more effective, especially with we have a demonic character, and I think maybe a little bit more could have been done with that to make it look a little bit more scary. It's very, very kind of light on the kind of the horror here. And I've got to say, I felt like the movie could have had a little bit more, I want to say a training montage. There needed to be more going on in the second act. The second act, it really dips in kind of, in the story, because not a lot actually happens. Our good witches have this kind of girl, and they're kind of like looking after her, but the story doesn't really kind of go anywhere, to be honest with you. And I felt that there could have been a little bit more done with it. It all feels very kind of insular. It needed to have a little bit more drama going on, or a little bit more, again, excitement. As it is, it feels very much like an episode of like Charmed, like a filler episode of Charmed, where it doesn't kind of fulfill any particular storyline. It's just a very much a bottle episode. That's the best way I would describe this. It's it's an entertaining film. Like, I quite enjoyed the characters, but it's really there's just not a lot to it. I felt like there needed to be a little bit more kind of going on, a little bit more visual pizzazz, perhaps. But I still kind of enjoyed it for what it did do. So I am going to give it a 6 out of 10. I don't think this is going to appeal to, obviously, the kind of the real hard sort of horror fans. But if you are maybe younger, or you like things like Charmed, that sort of thing, the Sabrina show, that kind of stuff, then you may want to check it out, because for a low budget film, I think at least our characters are quite fun, and that to me is one of the biggest things with a movie. If you can have fun or relatable characters, and I feel this movie succeeds in that, albeit a little bit cheesy. So 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.